Hi everybody, welcome back to Adventures in Polish Land. Today I have a non-spoilery series review of the old Filth Trilogy by Jane Gardam. I had discovered this series on a whim because I found the first book at a used bookstore in New York City. I picked it up because I saw it was published by Europa. I'm trying to read more books from that indie publisher, and when I read the snippet on the inside of the cover, I knew it was for me. And I'm so glad I found these books because overall I really enjoyed the trilogy, and today I'm going to share my thoughts on this series as a whole with all of you. So first, what I'll do is share a little bit about each book individually, and then I'll give my overall thoughts on the series. So the series is made up of Old Filth, then we have The Man in the Wooden Hat, and then we have Last Friends. Everything really revolves around our main character, who is Edward Feathers. You see him here on the cover. He is otherwise known as Old Filth. Filth is an acronym that stands for Failed in London, Try Hong Kong. So this first book really chronicles his life. He was born in Malaya to British parents during the time of the British Empire, and he is what you would call a Raj orphan, which means that although his parents, at least his father, are still alive, he gets shipped back to the UK to be raised by foster parents and distant relatives. So this book chronicles his life as a child growing up in those circumstances, but you also flash forward to his elder years where he is a widower, and you learn about his career as an attorney and a judge as well. So I found this book really interesting. Filth is a very unique main character because he goes through a lot of hardships in his childhood, and I felt really bad for him at parts. But he's also a very interesting person because he's not the nicest man, he's not the best man, and there are certainly faults with him. So he's a very complex character, and I also learned a lot about different aspects of history throughout this series, specifically in this first book with the whole concept of Raj orphans. I did not know about that, and it's actually really sad when you think about it, how kids grew up without their parents in sometimes really horrific conditions. So this book was very interesting for that purpose. In the second book, The Man in the Wooden Hat, we are primarily following Betty, who was Filth's wife. You find out a little bit about her backstory, but then you also learn about how she and Filth met and about their life together. This is my favorite book in the series. I found the pace to be very even, very compelling, and I found Betty to be a really great character because, much like her husband, she is flawed, but she goes through some really horrible things that make you feel for her, and overall I found her very interesting to read about as well. And then in this third book, Last Friends, this is pitched as Terry Veneering's story. Now, Veneering is Filth's nemesis. They are attorneys who butt up against each other over the decades, and in the end, they do become friends in their final hours. Or I shouldn't say final hours, they become friends in the last year or so of their lives. But not only does this book follow Mr. Veneering, but we learn more about another attorney named Fred Fiscal Smith, and we also wrap up a story of another character, the wife of another attorney. Her name is Dulce or Dulce, not sure how you say it. And so for that reason, this one was my least favorite book in the series, gave it 3.5 stars, but overall I thought it was a great way to wrap up the story. So talking about this series as a whole, one thing I love about this is how our author weaves all of these storylines together. None of these books are told in a linear format. In fact, you jump back and forth in time a lot. And in each of these books, there are scenes that overlap. So for example, one of the first scenes in Old Filth is when Filth gets locked out of his home on a snowy Christmas day, and he has to go next door to talk with Terry, his nemesis, in order to get out of the cold. And you actually see that scene in all three of these books, but instead of feeling repetitive, Gardam is able to create new details and new points of view for this scene throughout the books. And similarly, you get different aspects in each of these books that create one complex story and one overall worldview of this specific community that I found really interesting and compelling. I also really enjoyed the legal aspects of these books. I'm an attorney as well, and something that I can really relate to in these novels is how you see the same characters over and over. Because much like Filth gets super annoyed whenever he has to deal with veneering, I can certainly think of people in my small legal community. I work in a niche field, and there are certainly people that every time they end up on the other side of a case from me, I can't get over it. In fact, when I was reading this book, I was thinking about a specific attorney who gets on my nerves, but it's all good. That's just how it is in not only small legal communities, but I'm sure in many of your work communities, there are people that you deal with on a regular basis, and you might not always get along with them, but you respect them because they're very well respected in their fields. So I thought that was kind of funny, and I also found it interesting to learn about how the legal system works in the UK because it's quite different from here in the United States. The terms solicitor, barrister, lawyer, chambers, they're all used, and I learned a lot throughout this process, which I always appreciate as well. I also think it's really cool how these books deal with the UK and its empire throughout the years. So when the books start, it is before World War II. Then you see World War II happen. In Betty's story, it's right after World War II for the most part in the 50s and 60s. And then you also get aspects of, I would say, through the 90s to early 2000s when these characters are in their senior years of life. And that's also something I really appreciate with these books is you don't often get to follow stories about people who are in their last years and their friends are dying and they know they don't have much time left. It's very poignant to read about, and especially in this book, Last Friends, as you can imagine. At this point, a couple of our main characters have passed away and there's only a few people left, and it's really sad, but also they have lived these really long and interesting lives with complex events. So it's really fascinating to get that point of view in these novels. So overall, I would give this series a 4-star rating. The first book I rated 4 stars, this second book I rated 4.5 stars, and then this third book I rated 3 stars. But I really enjoyed the writing style. I found the books compelling. I wanted to be reading them. I found the characters had a lot of depth to them. And most of all, I just really love how Jane Gardam wove together all of the details from these 3 books to make a cohesive storyline and follow a specific community of attorneys and their wives and families in the UK during this time. So I would highly recommend this series. The books are pretty short. The first one is the longest, just over 300 pages. This one is about 270, and this one is just over 200. So it's a quick series, and actually, while I was reading it, I found out that the author passed away. So that I think is a little bit extra touching because when I first started this series, she was still with us. And when I went to look her up reading the second book, I found out that she had passed away in April. So I definitely will be keeping an eye out for more of her books in used bookstores where I primarily do my book shopping, because her writing was very easy to get into, and she has a vast bibliography that I would like to continue exploring. So that is it for my non-spoiler review of the Old Filth trilogy. You'll have to let me know if you've ever heard of this series before, or if you're interested in picking it up for yourself. If you've read any other books by Jane Gardam, I would love to know which ones you recommend. And also, if you know of any other novels that take place during this time in history following Raj orphans, I would love to hear your recommendations, because like I said, this was a new concept for me and I found it very interesting, very sad as well. But I think those children who got shipped overseas back to their parents were really strong and brave and faced a lot that we wouldn't deal with today or hopefully ever again. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are interested in following more of my reading, you can find me on Instagram at PolishedLandReads. I will have that linked in the description box for you. Bye!